This video will discuss strategies for dividing by fives. When dividing by fives, the most efficient strategy is to think multiplication. So you'll notice we have 40 divided by 5, and I'm going to think of 5 times what is 40. And if I know that fact, if I know my multiplication fact, and I know that 5 times 8 is 40, I can use that information to know that 40 divided by 5 is 8. So in this division problem, you'll notice we started off with the total. We started off with 40, that's called the dividend, but in my multiplication problem, you'll notice that the total is at the end, that's the product. Since there's this relationship between division and multiplication, I can use that to help me solve this division problem, and it's very efficient. But let's say I don't know, like in this problem, 5 times what is 35, and you know what, I just don't remember at this point what that is. What I can do is, I could skip count. So a way to think about one way, there are a couple, but one way to think about this problem is how many 5s are in 35. And if I think of it that way, I can skip count and keep track to figure out how many 5s are in 35. So I'm going to skip count, and when I hit 35, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to actually keep track on my fingers and see how many groups of 5 did I count. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. You can see there are 7 groups of 5 in my picture, so that means that 35 divided by 5 is 7. So although we came up with that answer, skip counting isn't that efficient, and we really want to try something a little more that goes more efficient than skip counting. So what could that be? Well, we could use something, you would refer to this as the distributive property of multiplication, and you're kind of using it in division. Basically, we're going to take this problem, we're going to chunk it into smaller chunks that I know to help me solve it. So let's say I don't know 30 divided by 5, and I think 5 times what is 30? I'm not quite sure, but you know what? I do know something, and I do know that 20 divided by 5 is 4. So since I had 30 and I've used in my total and I've used 20, I know that there's 10 left. So now I'm going to take that 10 left, and I still have to divide it by 5 because notice the divisor does not change. And I know that 10 divided by 5 is 2. So because I know those things, because I know 20 divided by 5 is 4, 10 divided by 5 is 2, I take both of those quotients, put them together to know that 30 divided by 5 is 6. So another way to look at that is using an area model. So let's say that this whole area of this rectangle is 45, because we know that this is our total, and I know one of the side lengths is 5. I really just have to find this other side length to figure out my answer. But you know, my most efficient method is to think 5 times what is 45, and if I don't know that, I've got to do something else. I have to find another strategy. So I'm going to use a fact that I already know. Well, I just figured out 30 divided by 5, and I know that 30 divided by 5 is 6. But I'd had 45, and I've used up 30 of that. And so I have to figure out what's left. Well, I know there's 15 remaining. So this part right here has 15 units. The area of that is 15. So now I just have to take that and think, well, what is 15 divided by 5? So I know 15 divided by 5 is 3. So the side length of 5, you'll notice, is right here. That's my divisor. My quotient is right here. It's this other side length. Well, 6 plus 3 is 9. So I know 45 divided by 5 is 9. So just to review those strategies, when you're dividing by 5, the most efficient strategy is to think multiplication. So if I have 50 divided by 5, I'm going to think 5 times what is 50? And since I know that answer is 10, I know that 50 divided by 5 is 10. But let's pretend we didn't know that multiplication fact. So in this example, 25 divided by 5, let's say I'm just not quite sure. I'm going to use a fact I already know. I know 15 divided by 5 is 3. I had 25 in my total. I've used up 15 of that. And so there's 10 remaining. So now I know that I have 10, and I have to take that and divide that by 5 using that same divisor. And I know 10 divided by 5 is 2. So now I just take those two quotients, put them together to know that 25 divided by 5 is 5. So remember, when dividing by 5s, your most efficient strategy is to think what times 5 equals the dividend, to really think of that multiplication fact. If you're not sure of that, use a fact you already know. Chunk it out using that number bond or that area model example. And then lastly, you could also skip count by fives until you get to the dividend, but your first two options are going to, after you practice them a while, are going to be much more efficient.